Welcome to the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. I'm thrilled you're here. My name is Jason Elkins, and in addition to being your host, I'm also a former U.S. Army paratrooper, third-generation commercial hot air balloon pilot, paramotor pilot, ex-Montana fly fishing guide, advanced open water scuba diver, and a full-time nomad that's visited more than 30 countries on 6 continents. As a seasoned adventure travel expert with a passion for creating and sharing meaningful experiences, I'm on a quest to impact the lives of adventure travelers, the tour operators they rely on, and the communities that host them. Every week, I bring you exclusive interviews with fascinating adventure tourism experts who have agreed to share their personal stories, favorite destinations, and some invaluable travel insights they've picked up along the way. We'll enjoy a casual conversation, create some connections, and likely share some laughs. It's my hope that by the end of each episode, this big world will feel just a bit smaller. Let's get started, shall we? Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Big World Made Small Adventure Travel Podcast. Today, we've got Monika Sundem. She is with Adventure Life. She's actually the CEO of Adventure Life, and she's been gracious to give us a little bit of time today to have a conversation. And Monika, welcome to the show. Happy to have you here.
Thanks, Jason. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so we spoke a few weeks ago, and I learned a little bit about your story, and I think that you've got a fairly interesting story, although a little different than maybe some of the folks that are working in this business. So I look forward to kind of digging into that and learning a little bit more about Adventure Life, a very well-known name in the business. I'm sure many of our listeners have come across your organization or worked with you on some level. So anyway, let's just jump right in. How did you get from where you were to where you are now? Tell us your story.
Yeah, it largely was by accident. We'll just, I don't know. Sometimes a lot of us end up where we're at a little bit by accident. So It really just was driven by pursuing my passions. And so I started out, I was in bookkeeping, going down an accounting bookkeeping route, and had just majored in Spanish and just loved Latin culture, was really inspired by a few international trips I took before in high school and during college. And so really just majored in Spanish because, I don't know, I wanted to speak Spanish. Yeah. I had a lot of people asking me, what are you going to do with this degree? Like, I don't know. I'm sure something will work out.
You figured it out. I'm curious about your trips. I actually don't want to gloss over that because I suspect those first few trips were probably, obviously you mentioned
pretty
them,
impactful.
So they had something to do with what's going on. So
this is Guatemala. It was my first, this is Lake Atitlan behind me. Those that can't see, she's got a beautiful painting of Lake Atitlan, and I see all 3 of the volcanoes. That's a favorite spot of mine as well. So very cool. I purchased it from a local artist on the streets of Santiago de Atitlan when we were there, again, later on in life. But so it really inspired me. I actually went on like a building missions trip with my church youth group when I was maybe 16 even, and just had a great opportunity to connect with a lot of locals in some of the highland towns that we were helping them build a kind of a church and youth center for their town.
Did your family encourage you to go on that trip, or how did that come about?
No, it was all me. I just got it in my head that it would be great to go and wanted to see the world. I don't know, I was a little ambitious as a teenager, perhaps that translated to adulthood as well. But I just wanted to go. So no, I had to fundraise to raise enough money because I was not from necessarily a wealthy family. So I had to do a lot of garage sales and rummage sales and everything to be able to raise the funds to go.
Were your parents supportive of that? Did they? Because I can imagine some scenarios where parents are like, no, I'm not going to let my daughter go to Central America.
Yes, they were supportive. Absolutely. It was through a church youth group that I had spent quite a bit of time with. So they knew the leaders well. And this was something that they had regularly did every 3 years. So it was not just this thrown together, hey, let's go do this. It was very well organized and structured. And there was a year of planning prior to it, and you had to apply to be allowed to go because I don't think they wanted a bunch of teenagers going who weren't going to keep in line. So yeah. In hindsight, I see some of that happening. So, but I think that's probably where my love of Spanish also took root, is just I mean, we got to work alongside a lot of Guatemalans there. There were a lot of Guatemalan teenagers helping build this site. So the opportunity to try to communicate and try to interact and share our lives it really touched me on a deep level. And just being able to, I don't know, I think everyone has this moment of just your eyes being open of people in other cultures are just like me. Yeah. In so many ways. Like there really are very few differences. And so just seeing that bridge between two cultures, I think really just lit a fire in me that I wanted more of it. So I actually went abroad multiple times to Nicaragua throughout high school and college years as well. Started helping with translating on some of those trips as well. And so I think that's just where it bred and ended up transitioning out to Montana. My husband and I were starting a ministry together out here in Montana. And I was doing the bookkeeping accounting thing. That was, what I was in. And just saw this little ad in the newspaper for this little company called Adventure Life that talked about if you love Latin culture, then maybe we're the right fit for you. Just, I don't know. And I didn't need a job at the time. I wasn't looking I was actually looking in the classifieds. This is back in the day when we looked in the classifieds for a job. I think about that. I'm probably dating myself here, but that was so long ago. I was looking for a friend because I had a good role. I didn't need a job and I couldn't forget about that little ad. Like, oh, maybe I can do something with this passion that I feel. And so that's how it all got started. I just started as kind of like the lower end data entry operations person who helped make sure all the paperwork was right and really got excited about being able to help other people go experience other cultures.
I'm curious, a couple of things, but the first thing, so when you started there, the ad you described was, are you passionate about Spanish culture? Okay,
Latin culture specifically. Like, do you want to help other people see the world? Are you inspired by other cultures? Something like that, then you might be a good fit. It was a really well written ad. Yeah.
Now, the first 6 months in the role, because I heard you saying a lot of administrative, a lot of data entry type of stuff. Do you feel like your passion for Latin culture really tied to that role, or is that a role that somebody could have done without having the passion for Latin culture?
No. I mean, the actual day-to-day work had very little to do with that. But being in the environment of it, I mean, our office in those days was decorated with stuff like this or, tapestries or things on the wall. So it kind of made you feel like you were getting a little taste of it every day. And then the conversations with our travelers for getting excited for their trip and then oftentimes even sharing about what they experienced when they got back was really inspiring, really motivating. I think that more than anything, like the connection with our other workers there who all were passionate about travel, but then also with our travelers who came back with incredible stories it made you feel like you're doing something worthwhile and it had a purpose, beyond just the paper pushing or the data entry. So it did fulfill that somewhat. I quickly moved into a sales role. I think within 3 or 4 months, I was assigned to Central America operations, and the gal who was doing, my little light loves to do this to me. I was assigned to Central America operations, and the gal who was doing the sales ended up resigning within a few months of me coming, and I was asked to quickly just scooch into the sales role then, since I had already traveled to Central America. I apologize.
Right. No, that makes sense.
I'm curious. Already traveled there so much. So I stepped into the sales role and was very nervous about selling someone something. I've had adverse reactions to sales people in just certain relatives who have never really necessarily wanted to connect with me, but always wanted to sell me something. And so I didn't want to be a salesperson. And I really resisted stepping into that role. But our CEO or founder, Brian Morgan, at the time was like, I think you'll find it's really different. Like most people who contact us already know that they want to travel there. And now it's just a matter of you putting together the logistics and inspiring them of what might be fun. And I did find that was a really good fit. Like I didn't feel like I was hard selling anyone on anything. It was, what are you interested in doing? And then here's everything I know we can put together and let me try to match it together and make a great trip for you. So it became very fulfilling very quickly in that way.
I'm curious, what was the official title of the role? Was it sales or planner or at the time? Do you remember?
I think we did call ourselves sales agents back then. And we did rename ourselves a few years after that. I do recall. we did call ourselves operations agent and sales agent, I think, at the time. But then again, as you said, no one wants to feel like they're being sold on going to Guatemala. Like, that's not something you should sell someone on. Like, you should inform them about what they might, be getting into and make sure it's a good fit for what they're hoping to accomplish. But you don't really have to sell people on travel. They usually either know if they want to travel or not. And it's just a matter of getting them into the right experience for what they're looking for. So
that resonates with me a lot. At one point in my career, I was promoted to sales manager, and I did not like the title at all.
The title, right?
Yeah,
you don't it's like feel like you're being I don't even know what it is, the pusher, the person who tells someone they need something that they don't need.
Yeah, and I'd always, up until that point, I guess I was a salesperson, because therefore you need a sales manager. I don't know, but it was, but yeah, it was a tour operation, it was travel, and it never ever felt like that. I was like, this is amazing. I get to chat with people all day about their trips and help them plan trips and hear about their trips. And it never once occurred to me that I was actually in a sales role until I got promoted into a new position that they created called sales manager. I'm like, I don't like this. This doesn't feel right. Yeah. The reality is it didn't change anything. But I remember for a couple of weeks, I was kind of embarrassed to have it on my signature block. I was like, because I was still interacting with clients. I didn't want them to see the word sales anywhere related to anything I was discussing with them.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
I had the same feeling about the word and did not, I was not okay with it. Yeah.
And I can tell you that I did go into real estate sales for a while. And that was like gouging my eyeballs out with a pickaxe or an ice pick. And that was when I was like, oh, this is sales. This is different, and my personality didn't change, but the requirements of the role definitely felt like they changed. And,
sure.
And, I was good at it only because I get myself in front of enough people that actually wanted what I had, that I never really felt like I had to sell anything. But there were other people in real estate that were real salesmen that they didn't have to talk to as many people as I did. So. But anyway.
Well, I find that, being a good salesperson I ended up doing very well in the role. And I think it was just that I was very good at asking questions.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like, you just have to be really good at asking questions and hearing what someone wants and then recommending something that would be a good fit. And it's kind of like common sense that way, I feel like. So.
Yeah, it just seems like a conversation that it's like, okay, I have some cool stuff, but I don't know what you like. So I'll ask you a few questions and
put
figure
it together.
Yeah. What are you trying to accomplish? What do you, why is that important to you? And a good traditional salesperson also does the same, but it's when you're quote unquote selling something that you do and want to do and are and excited about, traveling and these cultural experiences, it doesn't feel like sales. It just feels like, wow. And they called me. This is great. I get to help them. So I'm curious, because I think that this is what we're discussing is so connected with connections, human connections. And I heard you say when you went on your first trip, you kind of realized, wow, these people are more like me than they are different. It's the differences that can make it very interesting. I get that. But really, people are people. And I'm curious, was there someone on that first trip that, like, if I said, oh, tell me about someone on that trip that impacted you or had an impact. Is there anybody on that first trip?
I don't remember names so long ago. I could probably look up in my old journals and recall, but there were a couple of young boys who they were younger. They were probably 12 or 13, but who were very interactive, just very like typical boys, like anyone you would see back home, just wanted to connect, would play games with us. Once we got to know each other, like throw a ball at our backs, and they just wanted to interact that way. And I remember just thinking, oh, they do the same things. And, I could see their lifestyle and see how they live. And I think I'd always had in my head that you can't be happy if you don't have a lot of material resources.
Yeah.
And so to see happiness on their faces, I don't know. I've heard this saying that, happiness doesn't come from what you have. It comes from a state of gratitude. That if you have an attitude of gratitude and contentment with what you do have, that's what determines happiness. And so I really think I got to see that in that time there, is that these people are genuinely happy. And I think that revealed to me. So the differences have to do with, how they live, material possessions, some things like that. But a lot of the other things, family mattered to them, playing mattered, hanging out and being with other friends mattered. It's all the same things that matter really at the end of the day to me. Yeah. So I think it was very eye-opening for me, especially as a young person being born. I was raised in Redmond, Washington, so got to see Microsoft build my city pretty much. And it was really, I think, good for me and humbling to be taken out of that environment and see what I see. Elsewhere. Yeah.
And I think that kind of, I say our culture, I'm just going to say maybe North American, United States, is we're kind of fed this. I'm not trying to be, I'm not sure where I want to go with this, but growing up, I remember kind of the line was that, isn't America great? And it is. I'm proud American. And doesn't everybody else wish that they could live here? And this is such a great place. And yeah, I think when I first started traveling, I kind of thought that everybody outside of the U.S. was miserable and wanted to be in the U.S. And I quickly, I had some memories younger on as well, where I met people that were, I went to Australia and met some, I was 12 and some kids around my age, and we went and chased sheep and did things that Australian kids do. And they were so happy. And then at one point later on, I went to Cuba. And of course, my mindset, everybody in Cuba must be miserable. That's what I thought, right? Until I went there and the couple's walking down the street, holding hands, kissing, right? And just it was like Havana was like the city of love. It was like, people are still people and they've got their relationships and their connections, regardless of what, kind of what the political, economic things going on. I kind of felt the same way. That's cool. Okay. So then it's kind of the same question for when you started at Adventure Life, when you're like, okay, I'm working in the travel business now. Were there any colleagues or anybody there on the team that just like kind of that you remember as just being like, okay, yeah, a mentor or somebody like that? Any memories of that?
The whole team really mentored me. We were a very small group when I joined. I think there was maybe 12, 13 of us in a small little house. And then we got to start growing. And then we grew to eventually where the founder built a building for us, specific to Adventure Life. And so that was fun to see it grow and expand. But I do have fond memories of just all of us stuck we call it the living room, stuck in the living room together in our cubicles. So there were multiple mentors that I had on staff. One of them still with us. She's our finance director. She jokes about, she used to train me. She was the first one to train me when I first started. And she was convinced that I wouldn't last a day because we joke about it now that, because she would be showing me what to do and I'd just be like, and I wasn't taking notes so she thought this is just going in one ear out the other. She's not going to last. I have a kind of photographic memory. So if I see something visually, I pretty much can put it to memory on one go. But
she just assumed you were just
she invested a lot in me,
whatever. Yep.
But did it thinking that I wasn't going to pan out because she thought, man, this girl just isn't writing anything down. So it was funny to look back on. But she has been a tremendous asset to us and just a wonderful human being. And then the founder himself, Brian, has invested quite a bit in me as well as I started to change roles and move into different things. I think sometimes I used to drive him nuts with ideas. I would go to him and say, we really should do this. And I remember when we didn't have Nicaragua tours and I'm like, you really need to develop Nicaragua tours. And he would, at one point, I think he just said, I don't have the bandwidth to do it. You can go do it if you want to. And he would invest in me in how to actually do it. And if you will, probably just appease my requests to let me go do my project. But I really always was excited to tackle something new. And so he always took the time to really show me how to do it, which is ongoing today. He and I still connect on a quarterly basis here about various things. So.
All right. That's very cool. One of the things you mentioned, and I could kind of almost visualize it as you're describing, like in the house, in the living room, and all of you in there overhearing each other's conversations. I'm sure one person's on the phone with a client and another person's on the phone with a vendor. And what an amazing environment to just, it's immersion. It's like learning Spanish, right? It's like going to Guatemala if you want to learn Spanish or whatever, because you're just surrounded by it all day, every day. You can almost not learn. So now I think I know some things about Adventure Life that maybe I'm wrong, but most of your team now is remote. Is that right?
I was just going to bring that up, which is the biggest loss we have of now being a fully remote company. Yeah, we had shuttered our office space, actually rented it out to another company. We have a small, tiny office space we retain for physical inventory and, you know, a copier and things like that. But we only have 2 people who use that space, and the rest of us are fully remote now. And, you know, it's ironic because did COVID do it? Yes, but we were already moving in this direction before. We had already had a big push in 2018 and 2019 to move all of our systems to the cloud so that we could start to expand to become a remote company. And
what was the drive behind that? What were you trying to accomplish when you started to say, let's get ready to go remote?
Missoula is a very small college town where a lot of people come there to college. That's where the company was based. They come to the college, they maybe start their career, and then they move elsewhere, decide they want to go somewhere else. So the pool of hires back then, it's really changed in the last 10 years. So back then, the pool of hires that we had at our fingertips was pretty limited. And then tried to throw in there, trying to find someone with a lot of international travel experience, that made it even more limited. So there were people that we wanted to hire who were outside of Montana, and we just didn't have the capacity to do that.
I'm curious, and you share whatever you're comfortable sharing, but could you ever imagine a situation where Adventure Life would be based out of Pasadena, California, or Providence, Rhode Island, or was that just not an option?
No, I don't know. The founder is Montana, so no way he's leaving Montana. And there are a number of reasons why it hasn't really crossed our mind to ever be based in a different state. I mean, there's a lot of favorable business practices in Montana compared to others. So we did think about, though, just hiring, 1 or 2. We weren't thinking to have the whole office be remote quickly. I don't think that was the plan at all, but we wanted to be able to hire someone from another state if they were a good candidate and had applied.
That just didn't want to live in Montana because it does get cold.
And
there.
At that point, we had started to receive applications for that kind of, remote work was kind of starting to be a thing for certain industries, and some travel companies were already fully remote at that time because of the nature of our industry. Right. Of course, it makes sense for me to hire someone in South America if I'm selling South America trips. Like, there's a lot of benefits to that, including being close to inspect your own product. So we had thought that way before. We had come across individuals we would like to hire, but we weren't able to do it. And then I actually ended up giving my notice in 2014 to move 2 hours north out of Missoula. So I'm actually based up in Kalispell near Glacier Park. And my husband took a job up here that required us to move, and I was not able to be retained because we were not fully remote. So there were some other reasons too. Like, we had a difficulty retaining some of our staff who needed to move for business or for family reasons. We had another key employee move to Minnesota for a family reason as well. And it was very difficult. We had found workarounds at that point with our existing systems, but it was sometimes unreliable connections into our network, and there were issues with it. So we had decided it would be smarter to just be cloud-based, and then that would give us the flexibility to do what we wanted at that point.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. I was actually speaking with a company, I won't mention any names, but about doing some sales work for them, and as a South American, Latin American specialist. And I'm living and traveling in South America. They're like, well, we can only hire you. You have to work from the US. You can,
yes,
you get 2 weeks, silly? You get 2 weeks vacation, and then you can go anywhere you want. But when you're working, you have to be in the US. And I was like, well, there's no way I'm going to give up traveling South America so I can live in the US and sell trips to South America. It just did not make sense. It was like, I'm here.
Yeah.
So that was a short conversation. So what are the challenges realistically? Because you don't have that complete immersion. And when I led a team, I mentioned earlier as a sales manager, I led a team where we were basically in a big cubicle. and we learn so much from each other.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the biggest challenge to not, you don't have
it
that
really
anymore.
Is that the learning and the training has been slower, and because you're not surrounded by it. We used to strategically, when we were all in one office, sit certain people next to other people. We would do musical desks all the time, depending on what new hires we had brought in, to get people sitting by the person that would be the biggest asset to them in their training. And we just have to be a lot more strategic about it. We can monitor each other's calls. So the way you try to get that is you can have actually some of these systems let it ring to the new hire whenever so-and-so is receiving a call as well, so that you can hop on and hear their call with that person to try to learn and get that input that way. If you're in the middle of writing an email, though, you don't always hop on. And, it's very different than sitting there writing your email and then just hearing it in the background. So it has been a challenge. We've actually just recently tried to switch to doing in-person sit-ins with each other, essentially, where we'll fly in one veteran and we'll, put a new hire, and they'll work alongside each other for a couple days or even up to a week to try to give them that when they first start out. And then at that point, a lot of it really just has to do with that new hire being hungry to learn.
Yeah.
The resources are there. You can monitor, you can reach out, and we give them a mentor team. They can reach out and get all the information they need. And some use their mentor teams more than others. So it just has to do with desire level.
If you're going to send a message to the next new hire that you bring on to the team working remotely to help them adjust to that, what would you say? Like the next new hire is listening to this conversation. What do you want them to hear before they accept the job?
It would be to build real connections with your mentor team very quick and early, because there kind of gets to this point, once you're a month or two in, where you kind of feel like you can't reach out more because you didn't establish that relationship early on. Yeah. And then it gets a little awkward. And so building like a personal connection, we talk a lot about spending time asking each other how your day's going. Mm-hmm. When you switch to a remote environment, there's the temptation there to just get down to business whenever you're chatting, and instead of taking the time to actually have that personal chit chat that you might have around the coffee pot if you were in an office. So in some of our meetings, we try to have time for just personal chit chat. We do happy hours once a month where the goal is just everyone goes into the meeting to just talk about life, and you're not supposed to talk about work. You just need to share what's going on in life, because we need those relationships to be there. So we strongly encourage as well video calls. So people video call each other through our chat program all the time to be face to face, to not just be, sending chat messages to each other the whole time, but to actually connect face to face as much as possible in a remote environment. So those are some of the small ways which I don't think it's better. I don't think it'll ever reach the level that you can reach when you're all in an office together. But there are a lot of benefits to being remote as well that we're reaping. And so it becomes this balancing act of which is more important than others. And a lot of the people on our team, honestly, would not be on our team if it weren't for remote work. So we wouldn't have been able to hire them. So we have a really, really strong team because of that change. It's just we have to make sure we're not failing to connect.
Yeah. There's I'm fascinated by the whole subject, obviously, as someone that works remotely and travels. Mm-hmm. And I think it's probably enough for a whole nother episode of the podcast.
It probably is.
We're gonna table that right now. And when I start a remote working podcast, we can come back and continue the conversation. And I guess somewhat related, but not quite. As far as hiring people and finding people to come in and bring value to the team, I'm always curious. Like your first job at Adventure Life, you traveled a bit, but you weren't looking for a job in adventure travel. Do you tend to look for people to bring onto the team that have a lot of travel experience, or is it better sometimes to bring someone in? Because I've heard so many people say things like, "Oh, our best team members were school teachers, or whatever from outside the industry that just come in. They have that natural ability to try and help people, educate people, or whatever." So I'm curious, do you generally hire veterans, or what are your thoughts on that?
It's a real toss up. I joke that one of the most common denominators is that we all were servers.
Yeah.
We all learned how to multitask under pressure And
I've heard that.
with a high customer service expectation because your tips were on the line. And I have found the people skills from servers are critical in the role, which is interesting, especially when you're talking to people over the phone, which makes it harder to connect than in person. But, we've hired some who've been very successful, who had extensive travel experience. So absolutely. Of course, the clients always want to know, have you been there? It's a frequent question we get asked, and we want to be able to say yes. Usually the answer is yes if they got routed properly, but sometimes the answer is, well, no, I haven't been there, but there are like 5 other people on my team who have, because we have this collective knowledge base of our whole team. We actually just counted how many countries we all had traveled to collectively last year, and it was some crazy high number that I think we were all shocked, because there are points where we all feel like, oh, well, I haven't been to that country, therefore I don't know if I can speak to it. But there's someone on our team has been, and maybe has lived there even. A lot of us have lived abroad. So it's one of those things of, again, the resources are at your fingertips if even you don't have the personal expertise. So I have hired people who have not had extensive travel background because of that collective knowledge base that we are able to offer. However, we do try to get them traveling right away. So it's invaluable to be able to say, oh yeah, I've been there, and let me describe the color of the building that you're going to walk through when you first land on the ground. And, there's a lot of travelers.
Puts people at ease, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And the reason they're coming to us is maybe they don't feel fully comfortable planning it all out, or maybe they don't have the time to do so. But they're wanting to go through someone who has that expertise and on the ground experience. And we are able to offer that collectively, and then some. I mean, if we were to calculate how many times all of us have been to certain places, it would be crazy to count.
Yep, absolutely.
So yeah, it goes both ways. I think the more important thing in terms of who I hire is their ability to connect with people.
Yeah.
Like, we're in the travel industry, but we're in the people industry more than that. I feel like this is a people industry, especially what we do, custom and tailor-made travel. It's not that I'm selling you a package trip and here you go, take it or leave it. If you didn't like it, go somewhere else. We are customizing every experience to what they want. So we need to understand what makes them tick. Like, do you like to hang out at a pool, or would you prefer to be at a beach? Do you enjoy being in hot weather, or do you prefer to be in maybe higher altitude rainforest where it's a little bit cooler and not as humid? And, you need to know what would make them excited when you design their trip. So it really has more to do with like this kind of exchange, asking a lot of questions, getting to know what would be good for them. And the fun part is when it's like a family of 4, and well, the dad wants to do this, but the mom wants to do that, and they do not align. And then you have to figure out how to make everyone happy. But most of the time, people usually know roughly what gets them excited. One of our favorite questions is, what was the best trip you've ever taken, and why? Like, what were the components of that trip that really made it stand out in your mind? Because then that gives us a really good idea of what makes them tick. And how to design it.
And it's kind of a little bit of psychological type assessment and that too, especially when you've got the family dynamics. And I was speaking with someone actually earlier today that said he likes to ask, what was the worst part of your last vacation?
That would be a good question
or
too.
what's
Absolutely.
the worst trip? What's the worst trip you've ever had?
Yes.
And why? Because you can learn so much, because people remember the negative stuff. Like, it's so much easier for people to describe a negative experience than it is a positive experience. So I thought that was pretty brilliant. I'm going to be using that one in the future, I'm sure. But yeah, okay. So curious. I've got quite a few curiosities going on here. So at this point in your career, what do you get out of this? What gets you out of bed in the morning?
That's a very personal question. No, no. The answer is my dog's nose in my face. My dog's nose in my face, telling me it's time to let her out. But no, no. It's the people. Yeah. We collectively, our whole staff is like, the reason we get out of bed in the morning and go to work and keep doing this doesn't even necessarily have to do with travel, although that's like a nice perk and the icing on top. It's the people that we get to experience it with. So my own family, my own family at work, if you want it, my expanded work family, if you want to call them that. I mean, most of us, I think, on our staff would say it's the people we work with that make it amazing. And then add to that, it's our travelers. I mean, we have a lot of alumni travelers that send us pictures when they get back and share with us how awesome it was. And we've really forged some real personal connections with some of them. And I really treasure that. So it causes this whole thing to feel very purposeful. I think if we were, I look at other, not to knock other travel companies out there, but I look at other travel companies out there that just have a mammoth amount of travelers they're serving every year in set group departure tours and get them in, get them out. I think it maybe takes away from the ability to really connect that way when it's just kind of like a mass production. So we handle a lot fewer travelers, but we get to know them a lot more intimately. And I think that makes it feel a lot more fulfilling.
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember this one time, actually, one of my travelers, when I was in sales, she had lost her husband and her brother, and I believe her son, on that Antarctica flight out of Australia that went down to and ran into the mountain. This was back in I think even the 80s or something. I'm probably butchering it. And she just wanted to go back. She wanted to go back on an Antarctica trip to be there on the day that they died, on the anniversary of the day, and wanted to find some sort of cruise company that would maybe even allow her to get off the boat and be near that spot on that day. And I remember us just going to bat for her to try to get that done for her. And I remember just feeling a very personal connection to her. Like, I am so honored that you're asking me to help you with this. And it's those kinds of connections that really, I think, stand out in all of our staff's mind. Like, some of our travelers are really amazing. They have amazing stories, and we get to help them do homestays too with local families, which changes their lives forever. And I just think there's no comparison. So that's why I say too, I'm in the people industry. I'm not necessarily in the travel industry. So
yeah, it really is. I think, I've had this conversation with a few people. It's like, you can take me to the most amazing place in the world, but if there's nobody around to connect with when I'm there, I don't know. I don't think I could enjoy it, without that connection.
Completely agree.
It's, I wouldn't even go. I mean, if you said, okay, if I think of what's on my wish list, I would still at some point, I would like to go to Russia. But if you told me, okay, Jason, you can go to Russia but you can't talk to anybody. You can't even make eye contact with anybody.
But
you can't make eye contact. You can't share it with anybody. You're just on your own. People will be there, but they're not going to see you. You're just going to be invisible. I'm like, I could go to Google Maps and do Street View if I want to do that, right? So sit on my couch and do that. That's just, so it really is about the people. I really don't understand why else you would travel. Why would you travel if it's not about connection? I don't get it.
I wonder though if this is just a me thing, because, this is just how I'm built, because I'm the same way. I really love to interact with culture and other people. And I think I mentioned to you earlier that when I went to Antarctica, it was really lacking. And I went at a time post-COVID when you couldn't interact with anyone at the research stations or anything. So it was landscape. It was beautiful landscape. I can't lessen how dramatic and amazing it is. So everyone should go, yes, at least once. But I felt a lack of ability to connect with the local culture, and penguins don't count. And I've actually discovered that about myself. I don't enjoy trips that don't have a cultural connection element to them. It's just not who I am, I think. And I think different people are built differently, because I think other people are very much nature and landscape. Get me out there in the middle. I don't want to see a single other human soul. I just want to be the only one on the trail. And for some people, that really does it for them. So I do think different people are built differently in that regard.
I would still make the argument that it's still about connection. I'm going to go out.
Agree.
Connection of some sort, like connection with, like the person that wants to go camping in the woods for a month to test themselves, or the reality shows, where they go camping. I shouldn't call it camping. It's survival shows, whatever.
It's like,
okay, they're connecting, I guess, with themselves. I've spent enough time connecting with myself. I personally want to connect with other people. But even if it's nature or mountains, hopefully I've got companions. Like, they don't necessarily have to be the locals, be my preference. Typically, don't tell my friends and family that. I prefer to connect with the locals. But, hiking Kilimanjaro with, a few family members, friends, maybe even strangers. I'm sure there's a lot of connection there. But regardless, it's like without some sort of connection, I'm like, I kind of don't get it myself. But we're all different,
I don't either. I agree, either with your own travel companions or with the people you meet. But I was sent early on when I stepped in that sales role. I was going to take over South America sales, and I'd never been to Costa Rica. So I went down there on an inspection trip and went all over Costa Rica with our driver, seriously visited probably 30 different hotels. So it was truly an inspection trip. The goal was not to go down there and have fun. The goal was to see what we're doing and then be done. But I connected with my driver.
Yeah.
My driver was so hilarious, told such funny stories. And I remember just feeling like, if I think back to that trip, I remember my driver, not any of the rest of what I did. So it's interesting that way. And again, I was like, maybe I'm just built that way, but I do think it's those moments that really make something stand out. And that's repeatedly the feedback we get from our travelers, is that their guides are what makes or break the trip. They can go on an amazing trip and have an awful guide and it ruins the experience, or they can go on what I would call very basic, we did a real mid-range out of the blue trip for them to help them go, but their guide was amazing and they just sing our praise. So I do think it's the people that do make it stand out.
Yeah. And that, for me, that could be in my travels, if somebody could somehow download the top memories of the last 6 months traveling around, Colombia or Latin America, every single one of those memories is going to be a conversation, really. And I'm working on my Spanish. It's getting pretty good. I can pretty much have a conversation with people, but it's sitting on a park bench, drinking a Coke, just looking around, and some teenage kid walks up and sits down next to me because he obviously, I don't look like I'm from there, and he wants to have a conversation with me about whatever. And I have this really cool conversation with this teenage kid that I would never talk to in the US. We just wouldn't have a reason to, and he tells me about, his family and this and that, or just people on the bus. I like riding the bus. I don't want to, I don't dislike Uber, and Uber can be great because there's a driver and I have a lot of great conversations with the Uber driver, but I'm just much more inclined to get on a bus. And sometimes that means I'm standing up for, 30 minutes, going around the corners. But when you're bumping into people, guess what? You're creating a connection. There's that look on your face of, oh, whatever. And I wouldn't want to. And I guess where I'm going with this is I think that people that value that connection are much more likely to work in this business, because this business is all about connection. If you don't like people and you don't value human connection, it seems like a really bad job. You'd hate it. So
absolutely. Anyway. Yeah.
All right.
We put a lot of emphasis on that there are a lot of different kinds of people out there, and they all are so amazing and worth knowing. And if we can all have a curiosity and wanting to ask questions to get to know people, we find that we have a lot more in common than we do different. And that's inspiring and exciting and helps us to bridge those gaps easily, sometimes so easily. I had my son accuse me of being too friendly the other day because I was talking to this gal in line, and he was just like, you're so friendly, Mom. And I'm like, is it gonna rub off? Like, yes, that's how you have to be. Because why else bother being on the planet if you're not going to connect with the people who are right in front of you and standing next to you? So
I agree. And so there's that just in everyday life at the grocery store, whatever. And then it's like a whole nother level when you go to another culture. Because yes, they're so similar in so many ways, but it's really, I remember connecting with a guy in Guatemala, actually Lake Atitlan, which is appropriate as I look at the photo behind you. And this, I can't remember which of the little, I think it was Panajachel. And he was a Japanese guy about my age. He owned a motel or a hotel. There's a difference here. He owned a hotel that I was staying at, and he spoke no English. My Spanish was pretty choppy. Obviously, I don't speak any Japanese, but he's a Japanese guy. Grew up in Japan. He'd been living in Guatemala for 10, 15 years, something like that. And he was born and raised in Nagasaki, and I was born and raised in the U.S. there's a connection between Nagasaki and the U.S. that can't be denied. And, he grew up, his family was from Nagasaki. That was his, ancestral home. And here we are sitting in Guatemala, and he brought out the photo journal. We're speaking in Spanish, and he's showing me pictures of his family. He's showing me pictures of his son who was in military school in Guatemala. He was very proud of his son, and, showing me the pictures of his graduation. And we had this amazing connection between the Japanese middle-aged guy, the American middle-aged guy in Guatemala speaking Spanish. And it was just like so freaking cool, to have that. And I wouldn't have got that if I was sitting at home or at the grocery store back home. So there's so much value in doing it. And you're not going to do that on a cruise ship either.
No, it doesn't. I know.
Not knocking cruise ships, but.
Well, and we have so many, we do expedition style cruising, like so smaller ships, like 300 or less, which makes it a little easier to connect.
That's different. But
even on that, sometimes I feel like, well, I don't know. Get me off on land with the locals, but I don't know what that is, but in me. But no, I find that when you're in a culture, even if you can't speak the language, it's like a smile says 1,000 words. It's really all you need. A smile, body gestures. You can communicate quite a bit with people, even if you don't know the language. And
that's interesting. And I'm not sure a lot of people, specifically maybe that live in the States and haven't traveled outside the States. I suspect a lot of Americans, not just Americans, people that haven't traveled to another culture where they speak a different language, think, I can't go there. I can't go there because I don't speak the language. Or the only way I can go there is on a big cruise ship. So when I get off, I've got a bunch of Americans with me, and I don't have to, someone there might be able to speak. But the truth is, I came to Colombia. I've been traveling full time 2.5 years. I came here with a one-way ticket 2.5 years ago with zero Spanish. And Colombians aren't really particularly known for speaking a lot of English. That's fine. I said some funny things, and I did some funny things. I had some funny misunderstandings. But you know what? If you can look a person in the eyes, you probably can figure out how to communicate.
Absolutely.
It's like, I'm hungry, use hand and arm signals. People and they want to help if you try.
And especially today with Google Translate, almost everyone has Google Translate. You can get by and gestures. And I remember one time, I don't remember where I was, but I was trying to buy something and I was all by myself. I didn't have anyone who could interpret, and I didn't know how much it was. And so I just literally held out all my money. And just trusted the shop owner to only take what the item was worth. And I'm pretty sure they did, which was helpful. And they just laughed let me do it for you. So you can get by, you can figure it out. Then it's kind of a notch on your belt later. Look at that. I survived. And I was actually talking with some colleagues of what did we used to do before we had cell phones and Google Translate, and you could call an Uber even in another country. And we used to get out the maps and you used to just fudge your way through it. That's how you used to travel. So we could do that again. It makes it kind of exciting.
It does. And that's part of why I like taking buses. I generally don't really know honestly, I don't. Oftentimes I don't know where the bus is going when I get on, but I know that where I want to go is that direction.
Roughly that direction.
And that bus is going roughly that direction. So there's a pretty good chance it's going to get closer than I am now. So if that means I get on and 3 blocks from now, it takes a sharp right turn and I realize, it's no longer going the direction, I get off. It's no big deal, and sometimes just get on a bus and go until it stops and get off and walk around. And especially since we have things like Uber, you can't get that lost anywhere.
You really can't. No.
No. If the bus gets to the end of the route and stops and you're like, okay, I don't want to be here. Okay, get an Uber. You know, and as long as you know the address where you're staying, it's not that
You'll
hard.
get there eventually. Yes.
Yeah. So
especially
I just
today.
encourage people, if your story is, I can't go because I don't speak the language, maybe dig a little deeper. Maybe there's another reason you're not going, but don't let that be the reason.
Sure.
Don't let that be the reason.
I think it has more to do with stress level of for a lot of people, they don't have a lot of time off if they live and work in the US, and they want to maximize it, and they don't want to be stressed out while they're on vacation, or maybe they don't want their wife to be stressed out while they're on vacation, of how they're going to get to their hotel. So
Fortunately, they can call your team.
Exactly. That's where I feel like a lot of the kinds of people who I think use a service like ours is because they just want it to go smoothly. They don't want to have to be standing in the middle of the road wondering which bus is going to get them there, but they do still want the experience of experiencing the culture as if they were out on their own adventure. So, and I'm
happy you said that, because I'm not saying that you have to go jump on a bus and not know where it's going to fully experience Costa Rica.
People should do that, even if they go with their guide. It is an experience. Yeah.
Yep. It's
I remember.
And actually, just having someone else along can be either more complicated, depending on the person. Or, I was in Colombia for 3 months and never got on a bus until my kids, my daughter and my son, came to visit me. And I'm like, okay, I got to get on a bus. And I got on a bus with them for the first time. And it was nerve wracking because if we get lost, then, I've got a teenage son and a daughter, and I was going to feel a lot of responsibility, but just having them with me somehow gave me a little bit of more confidence, and okay, we're going to do this. And if it goes bad, we're going to have a good memory. Well, hopefully a good memory. We're going to have some sort of memory. And, So
I remember my first chicken bus experience in Guatemala. I thought I was going to die. I mean, this was 20 years ago or more, but it was like they are going 40 miles an hour around these roads with no guardrails on a cliff. And I just remember being like, don't look at it. But I've survived. I've done buses like that so many times, and I've been fine. So
I love
they
that.
do them every day.
I was a little later in life before I had the first chicken bus in Guatemala, but Jackson was with me, my son, and we got on this little, cooperative van or whatever. And sure enough, there's a woman with a burlap sack with 4 or 5 roosters in it. And then, and there's the family right behind us, and the little girl is throwing up the whole, it was 3.5, 4 hour bus ride. She was throwing up the whole way. The chickens were right there. And it was fun. And I loved it because I was like, you know what? My son's 15. He's on a chicken bus in Guatemala.
Yeah.
At 15.
He's seeing real life. Yeah.
Yeah. And I had traveled a lot, but he's traveled a lot more than I have by the time, he's 17. He's been to 10 countries. I was probably mid-20s before I got there. But anyway, it's these experiences. There's so many great experiences out there. What's the downside? What's the thing that, like, because I'm sure you get people all the time like, oh my God, Monika, you're living the life. You're living the dream. This is amazing, the work you do. And I want to dig just a little bit. We don't have to go too deep, but what's the thing that people don't realize about the business that you have to convince your friends and families that, no, this is a job. It can be challenging at times. So what is it?
The travel is a lovely perk, but even the travel sometimes I feel a little jaded on because I have 4 kids. I have life at home. Leaving home is very hard, actually. I'm sure a lot of people understand that. There's a lot of responsibilities to cover at home if I go. So it causes guilt if ever I leave. Yeah. But honestly, the biggest thing is the weight of my decisions or the burden of all the staff that we have in our company, and me wanting to make sure that I am ensuring a positive future for all of us in how we run the company. So I had not expected, I did and I didn't, but when I assumed this role, I had not expected that weight to be quite as heavy as it is. So I would imagine a lot of CEOs feel that way. Especially of smaller companies. We're still relatively a small company. We're kind of in that middle land right now, but where I know everyone's name, I know their face, I chat with them directly. Nobody is refused access to me on our staff. Anyone could message me at any time and they get my attention. So I feel a very personal responsibility to all of them. And I watched our founder go through this during COVID too, when we had to lay a bunch of staff off, and it was just gut wrenching because we really do view each other as like a work family. They're my people. So it's incredibly, incredibly real and felt. Even right now, travel's rebounding right now. We're in a good time right now, but I know how the travel industry is.
Yeah.
When an election doesn't go right or stock market plummets or things, travel's usually the thing most people cut out of their spending. And so our industry tends to fluctuate quite dramatically. And so that is a real burden that I feel on a regular basis. So
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I can imagine. And I suspect that I'm happy that you brought that up, because I suspect that when they look at you, oh, look at you, you're at the top of, adventure life. Wow. What a great job. And all these perks and all this stuff. It's so easy to probably forget that you're still running a business with employees and families and decisions and a volatile market potentially, or at times. Whereas I suspect if you were CEO of a construction company with the same number of employees, people would probably be a little bit more sensitive. Wow, you must have a lot of pressure on you, because they see it as a normal business.
A normal business, yes.
Where they just see travel as like a hobby and like, ooh, isn't that cool? Look what you're doing. And they don't realize, but wait, accounting, budgets, P&Ls still work. we use those in travel as well. And so, yeah, I can see where people might miss that, hey, this really is a business with responsibilities. And so, cool. I appreciate you sharing that.
It is interesting. But I mean, I can't complain. I'm in an industry that I strongly believe in.
Even if you did.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to listen to you.
No, they'd be like, oh, whatever. You're just trying to find something to complain about. Yeah.
I remember when I was traveling specifically for work, doing a site visit. I'd spent 3 weeks in New Zealand, and my wife at the time just didn't want to have anything to do with me complaining about how hard I was working, or if I was in the Bahamas or South America, and I could say, oh my gosh, I've been with my clients from 5 a.m. until 10 p.m. every night for a week, and some of them are really challenging, and the boat broke down, whatever it was, whatever challenge or obstacle. Whatever. You're not working. This is just vacation.
I know.
Yeah, well, not quite, but
I'm very careful to not complain about being tired when I come home to my family because of that.
But at the same time,
I'm exhausted.
I heard you when you said I've got 4 kids, and when I leave, the responsibilities at home don't stop. So I can imagine coming back and like, okay. Yeah, because some people, they talk about we need a vacation after the vacation, or, when you're out traveling, you said you visited 30 some places in Costa Rica on your first fam trip or inspection trip. That's exhausting.
It is. And eventually they start to mold all into the same place in your mind too. And you're just like, I don't even know what I did. Yeah.
I remember I was supposed to write reports for every place I visited, right? To share with the rest of the staff and to share with the lodge owners. And I quickly learned that if you don't write them as you go, or at least take really good notes,
no chance.
You get home and your family is waiting for you, and your regular normal work is waiting for you. And 3 weeks later, someone's like, hey, did you get those reports done? Where are those
reports?
Like,
and then you don't remember.
I don't even remember going. Like, was I there?
No. Or even if you write as you go, you find suddenly by the end, wow, I called all 10 of them charming. And like you're using the same adjectives over and over again because you're running out of words to describe each one. It can be difficult. Yes.
Anyway, you and I could probably just keep chatting forever, and I want to be respectful of your time. I appreciate you sharing your time with us today. Is there anything I forgot to ask, should have asked, or anything, Monika, that you just want people to know about either you, adventure life, the state of the travel industry, anything that we haven't covered that you want to make sure we cover before we wrap up?
Not really. No, I think we hit it. It was good.
All right. Great. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much. That was a really great conversation, a lot of fun, and look forward to, we'll record episodes 2, 3, and 4 later on, but appreciate you being here with us today. Thanks, Monika.
Sounds good.
All right. Bye-bye.
I trust you enjoyed listening to the conversation as much as I enjoyed recording it. If you're enjoying the Big World Made Small podcast, please take a moment to tell the algorithm by subscribing and posting a review so that others can benefit as well. I also invite you to take a quick trip over to bigworldmadesmall.com and join our private adventure travel community to receive new episode notifications, special access to our guest experts, and perhaps even some exclusive partner offers that we haven't discussed on the podcast. I'll publish another episode soon. Until then, keep exploring. It's the best way to make a big world feel just a bit smaller.